If you could grab a seat if you have one, and we'll get started here shortly. I want to start by welcoming everyone here tonight for the first evening of budget deliberations. I want to thank the staff and the budget team and EMT for their work in bringing this draft budget forward. And now that we've had some time to review, collect feedback, it's ultimately the budget committee who will take ownership over this budget. I want to thank everyone in the public for providing feedback over the last couple of weeks. That's important and impacts what happens here over the next few days. It's also important to know that the feedback isn't only relegated to 1 2-week period every year. Every night that we're here in council, we're making decisions, shaping policy, and creating priorities that should be based on what's best for the community. This isn't just a 2-week exercise, and we need to be cognizant of the decisions we make throughout the year, the priorities we create, and how it affects this budget conversation. I think it's fair to say we've heard the message about prioritizing affordability, responsible investment in infrastructure, and maintaining services residents rely on. We've also heard that these are long-term priorities and that we must think beyond just today's impacts when we deliberate. This evening, we're gonna work through a couple presentations. We'll have some deputations upcoming shortly. We're not going to take motions directly from the floor unrelated to items tonight. We'll do those tomorrow night. So as we work through infrastructure, we'll definitely take any motions that are related specifically to infrastructure. Just for anyone that's watching at home tonight or anyone that's here, you'll notice that this flows a little differently than a council meeting. So this is a budget committee meeting. Committee meetings are a little bit less formal. You might notice some pausing, some side conversation. When questions are asked, sometimes we need a little time to formulate an answer. So just be aware that it'll look and feel a little bit different. Do we have any disclosures of pecuniary interest from committee members tonight? Okay, seeing none. We'll move over to Gord with some results of the community meetings.
Thanks, Brock. Everyone got a bundle of new information tonight. So we have the police services presentation. Chief Khan will be making that presentation tomorrow at the beginning of tomorrow's meeting, but you have it there so you can look over it tonight. We have community feedback. This is the feedback from the 5 community meetings that we had, in addition to any emails or that have been sent into our the budget inbox to give to council. There's the presentation that Gabriel will be making in a few minutes on the environmental lens. And then there's some stats on the 6 years of the full-time equivalent summaries and 2019 expenses and revenues by departments. So that's a package that's been given out. All those items have been added to the website as well, so those at home, you can look up that information as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Gord. So now we're going to move into deputations. Just a reminder for anyone that's here tonight, if you do want to make a deputation, you still have an opportunity tomorrow night as well. You just show up before the meeting and put your name on the piece of paper that's at the door. So we do have 4 people signed up this evening. We'll start with Kelly Gottschling from the Mental Health Network. If you want to come up to the microphone.
Good evening, Mayor Caniff and members of council. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Kelly Gottschling, and I am the Executive Director of the Mental Health Network on Raleigh Street. I have asked to speak this evening on behalf of those who cannot. I believe Chatham-Kent has more people living in poverty, homeless, experiencing mental illness, and living with addictions than ever before. Not one of our citizens should be living on the streets, under bridges, in forests, and along riverbanks. Many people in our community say, oh, they don't want help, or they are addicts. So what if they are? They are persons of Chatham-Kent. What is our local and provincial government doing to support our most vulnerable people? Our organization, along with others, do everything we can with a very tight budget, but we want to do more. We need funds to do so. I spend my days with amazing people who live with symptoms of mental illness and addiction. If their main source of income is ODSP or Ontario Works, it automatically means they are living well below the poverty level and at risk of homelessness every day. We host forums in Chatham-Kent on the sex trade industry, yet we are creating our own sex workers. I know many young people who are trading sex for a couch to sleep on, sex for food, sex for a ride from the food bank so they can feed their children. Our government has waited too long to solve some of these problems. We can't hide it or pretend it away. We must fix what is broken by adding more money to housing and poverty prevention programs, while ensuring that our people have a safe place to live and enough food to feed themselves and their families. It is impossible for people to get well when they don't have a secure place to live or eating out of dumpsters. If I had to pay a 4.99 tax increase, I would gladly do so to allow my friends to live in safe, affordable homes. Our housing list has a 5-year wait. We need to subsidize every person on the portable housing list who is permanently housed but pays high rent before they are forced to leave their home. It is far more cost-effective to be proactive rather than reactive. Giving a person $300 or $400 rent subsidy can make such a difference in the lives of someone living in poverty. As some of you know, rent is very high in our area, and many people on ODSP are living on $200 a month after they pay rent. That covers food, transportation, clothing, laundry, and personal items. People on Ontario Works receive approximately $750 per month, with the average apartment rental now $850 plus hydro. There's no math to do there. Many people on Ontario Works are forced to live with the landlord taking most of their money. They sleep on the floor just so they have a roof over their head. Some landlords have as many as 10 people living with them, sharing 1 or 2 rooms, but they have nowhere else to go. Yes, we can provide them 3 nights in a less than desirable motel, but that is a Band-Aid solution. They end up back on the streets a few days later. I believe that our housing system in Chatham-Kent is broken. I know we have a plan to fix it, but we cannot wait any longer. I can count how many people are homeless from my house to my place of work every day, but I know what to look for. I've lived in Chatham-Kent my entire life, and I've been employed in social services for 23 years. Never have I seen such despair. I'm asking Council to make a commitment to offer more rent subsidies and to provide geared-to-income apartments for those who are homeless. Getting our citizens off the street and allowing them to feel safe, have decent food, and get proper medical care that they need must be of greatest importance. They are our citizens, our people. Please see them as a priority. If a person has no safe place to lay their head, how can they be healthy, contributing citizens? Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Next deputation is Robert Hacker.
How close should I get?
That's perfect.
Honorable Mayor, councillors, managers, tonight, I've already sent this summary to all the councillors. It's way too long for 5 minutes. I've retracted a lot of it, deducted most of it. So I'll just give you a few points. What I never hear coming out of this office is the overwhelming majority of spending. I never hear it. It's never attacked. It's never addressed. My goal is that you will recognize the need to bring the budget in line. For the points that I'm ready to make, you might just be able to solve the previous lady's problems. We must be reminded, first of all, that the source of government funding is the private sector. That is the other side of the scale. We somehow have forgotten the balance of what makes communities communities. If you're not aware, we have created the biggest divide, and it's growing all the time. We have a divide between the haves and have-nots. We have growing wage disparity. And in Canada, we have a growing divide between the public and the private sectors. This doesn't look good in a historical sense, but I haven't got time for that. I can give you the last 20 years. You can sit here and paint your fancy website, hang your banners. You can hire super optimistic representatives praising all the good things that are at Chatham-Kent. And there is a lot of good things. But there has to be oversight. There has to be fiduciary responsibility, which I'm not seeing out of the three budgeteers any year that I review this. Should be a qualification. You set off plans in 2035 when most of you are going to be gone. The biggest problem, as reviewed in the presentation, is that we don't even cover the expenses of our own budgets. Our growth of the community, termed as assessment growth, doesn't cover it. Barely covers half. And so you just keep adding taxes and taxes and taxes and increases. You've been doing this for 20 years. Now, I hope I don't need to remind anybody, but I'm gonna. When you keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results, that's the definition of insanity. Take it from me. After 30 years, I had to find a way. Some will say it wasn't easy. I thought it was fun as hell. It sharpens you up. It makes you what you are capable of. This is what I'm not seeing anywhere. And I'm just some schmuck from Chatham who never got to make a living in Chatham. I had to move out of town. In a quick review from the year 2000 to 2009, each and every year shows a growing staff with wage increases. This is off your own website. 2%, 2.5%, 3% wage increases every year. Now, what most of us don't know and we've forgotten is math. We compound that over those first 10 years, you get a 28.6% wage increase. Now, you tell me where you see that in the rest of the public, rest of the private sector. And that involves over 90,000 people in this community. The majority. This office, this building is here to serve the community in balance. So it's time we start looking at this, or else just forget it. A 28.6% increase in the first 10 years, up to 2009. I would have done the last 10 years, but they don't put up as much information on the website as they used to. Amazingly enough, so much for transparency, one of your goals that you set out for 2035. That 28% increase equates to $50 million in extra taxes. Has anyone even come across the simple thing? I haven't seen it. $50 million bucks. If you hired no one, made no wage increases since then. In the last 10 years, that's $500 million. People want to know where the money went? I'm staring right at it. This is so simple, it's not even funny. The largest growth in this whole country has been public sector employee wages. You've got the union on your side. Need I remind you that historically, unions were not allowed into civic service. Why? Because you had job security. Even when the economy hit the tank, the municipality is always guaranteed their money. Somebody doesn't pay their taxes, they take their property and sell it anyway. Your
Mr.
budget
Hacker,
hardly changes.
We're just past 5 minutes, so I'll give you another minute to wrap it up.
I think that's enough. If I can ask anybody, it's the councillors. Take a look at where the biggest chunk is. I've seen quite a few corporate balance sheets. I've helped companies try to get through whatever problems they've had. You start with the biggest chunk. And if you want to hear from the poor disabled guy who's given a deputation, well, let me tell you, when you suck up $50 million over 10 years, that doesn't go to the person who needs it. Does it? That's $500 million to help build the enclaves in your half-gated communities. You're very welcome, by the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Next up is Angelo Ligori.
Is that better? Okay. Mayor Caniff and council members and ladies and gentlemen, I'm here for a repeat performance, and it's about our favorite trail that eventually would surround all of the Thames River all the way down to Pancourt, the Prairie Siding Bridge. This past August, we had an opportunity to put up a very nice plaque with a bench. Thank you to the whole team that's done that phase. Our president was here and jogged from Retro Suites to it. And now we are looking at phase 2. I understand that just from what I've heard, the last update from one of our community members, these are tough decisions to make. They always are. We promised $250,000 over 5 years, and we plan to hold that commitment. I have the contract right here. I've read it over. However, it's tied to a 5-year plan, so if we miss 1 year, we are going to forgo $50,000. So for the phase that's currently set up, I hope everyone understands that. However, our commitment is there. I personally had to work very hard all the way to our board members to get that money. And every year, I'm still employed with a company. I get asked, Angela, how is it going? So I wanted to be here today to let everyone know that I stand by the promise. And I would like to see this go through. It's all set. I was updated by Greg, and he's ready to go for this year. So I'm here today to reassure that our commitment is there. However, we have an agreement. The other part here is Diane is here, Paul, and all of the members of the Trails Committees, and they've asked me to be their spokesperson, primarily because they believe in our cause. What we are doing for the community is incredibly well aligned with everything. Now, by the way, we have 2 employees that have moved in from other locations to Chatham. One is dating, and hopefully they'll get married. and live here, and they tell me that all the work that we're doing here to attract all the youngsters, and these are folks that are 23 or 24, are actually coming to Chatham. So I think that this cause that we're doing will align very well with what we're trying to do. So when you go through that analysis, please consider the good and the healthiness that this trail will do for us in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. Our next deputation is Donna Person.
I'm here representing the Aquafit members from the Wallsburg pool. We've been fighting for 6 years to keep our pool open. Thank you for allowing us to do so. The seniors in Wallaceburg, though, we're tired of being ignored. We've been talking with Chatham-Kent Rec, and they keep telling us it's the budget committee that's causing our problem, and I've learned the budget committee wasn't aware of the problem. So now you are. What's happened is, when you look at your own book that's here, oh, shoot, I had this all, where'd it go? Anyway, what's happening is, as you can see here, anything in yellow, that's Aquafit. You'll notice one page is quite busy. There's lots of choices there. That's the Blenheim pool. The one with 3 choices, that's the Wallaceburg pool. Anything in gray is what you'll find is a lane swimmer, someone that just goes for general swims, okay? And they're the gray ones. Again, lots of choices. Where our problem is, we're very happy with what we got. We know we don't have the same amenities as Blenheim pool. We don't have the hot tub. We don't have the lockers. We don't have the change rooms. We don't have, privacy. We don't have the space. All this, we don't have 12 classes a week or a month, a week, sorry. We have 3 45-minute classes. If ever there's a closure, it's always on one of our 2 days because it's Mondays and Fridays. We're only 45 minutes. All the other classes are an hour. We don't understand why we are paying more than twice what all the other people are paying, okay? We're paying the same as Blenheim, except for one thing. Blenheim gets a discount from one of their local places for being seniors. We don't get that. A lane swimmer, for example, or a couple. We have a couple at our pool that keeps telling me to shut up at our meetings and quit asking for things because they're paying $166 per person to swim 7 days a week if they want to. A general senior citizen can pay $202. Regular adult, it's just slightly higher. It's all in the list. But we're paying $440 a year. And if something happens on a Monday morning, we can't come because it's foggy or icy, we have to come at noon hour, we pay an additional $4.50 on top of that to be able to swim during that. What we're asking for is, when you look at this chart, everybody gets a price for 6 months. There's also a price for 1 year. We don't have a price for 1 year, okay? Why should we, if you're a lane swimmer, a whole lane of the pool is stationed out for you. There's a rope there, that's your area. There's a lot of costs for those ropes because they're very expensive. And those 5 or 6 people that get a rope of their own pay half of what the ladies do when we get a bunch of us. And with the seniors group, we're mainly ladies that have arthritis, cancer, broken bones that are healing, whatever. We're there because if we don't move, we can't move. We need it. The senior population is aging in Chatham-Kent. More people need to be exercising. More people need to be doing Aquafit. We do have a number of people that are just going for a regular swim because it's cheaper, okay? And they're saying they're exercising. Go to any Tuesday or Thursday night and watch those people, and they're standing there going, oh yeah, I'm exercising. They're not doing anything except visiting and talking or maybe walking back and forth in this much of the pool because this much of the pool is lane swimmers. And they're not getting the benefit of it. It does not cost Chatham-Kent anything extra for our lane swim or for our Aquafit group because they don't pay anyone to teach the class. We have one of us teaches the class, tells us what to do. If she's sick and can't make it, then the lifeguard takes over and does it. There is no extra lifeguard. She does not get paid extra for doing it. It's just because it's labeled as Aquafit, we're paying twice the price. We're not getting twice the service. Blenheim's getting more times, they're getting more services, they're paying the same or less because of their discounts they're getting. The Aquafit people can go 7 days a week. They can go with their grandkids on the weekend if they want. They don't have to pay extra. They paid that one price a year. We want a one-year rate and be able to come the same times as anyone else is paying half the price, or better still, let us pay the same as all seniors are paying, since it's not costing Chatham-Kent anything extra at all. We're not asking for the world. We're not asking you to give us a hot tub. We're not asking you to, you know, give us more lockers or anything like that. All we're asking is let us take care of what we got. Let's get it maintained. Had to close yesterday because they had metal coming down from the roof. I mean, we're not the same building facilities as Blenheim. Why should we be paying the same as Blenheim? And why should we be paying twice what everybody else is paying? A family of 5 can swim 7 days a week in our Wallaceburg pool for only $45 more than what a senior's paying. And that's provided that senior does not attend one extra day with their grandkids or come with their husband or anything like that. If they only came during those 3 initial classes. So if we're paying twice as much, we're getting less than half what everybody else is. We'd like to have it looked at, and I've been told it is maybe finally going to get looked at. Ideally, many of the ladies would like to see us pay the same as all lane swimmers are paying. But
Thank
if
you, Donna.
not, at least give us a 1-year rate. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a reminder for anyone else that would like to do a deputation, feel free to come tomorrow night before 6 o'clock and sign up for one. Moving along in the agenda, our next item is a presentation on budget through an environmental lens. So I'll call up Gabe Clark, our environmental planner.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So I've been asked to present on the climate lens that we've been developing since the fall of last year. So I'll try to go through this within a reasonable amount of time. So I'm here to talk about the climate lens. I've talked about the climate lens a few times before in front of this council, probably most in detail on November 4th when we talked about our approach to the climate emergency declaration. And in that information report from November 4th, we stated that we would start the development of a climate change lens as part of the 2020 budget process to identify opportunities to reduce emissions and also to increase resiliency to the municipalities, or to the community through the municipalities' investments. So that's really what the goal of the climate lens is to identify opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase resiliency through the things that we purchase as a municipal government. So before we get into the actual climate lens, I just want to talk about what an actual lens is. So I pulled this definition up off the internet. I hope it's correct. But basically what it says is in theory, it is a lens is a theoretical perspective that contains a set of assumptions about reality that inform the questions that we ask and the kind of answers that we arrive at as a result. So in this sense, it's a lens through which we look, serving to contextualize what we see. What that means in practice is that we ask, as part of the budget development process, a series of questions to evaluate potential projects and investments to ensure that climate benefits are considered during the decision-making process and integrated into the initiatives when it makes sense to do so. And so as part of the development of the climate lens, I'm going to this lens tries to explain it in a graphic form. So bear with me and please ask some questions if I'm not making sense. But when we talk about climate change action at the municipal level, and really at any level of government or in the private sector, we can look at addressing the source of climate change, which is called mitigation. And really, in terms of that concept, the focus areas are on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and on reducing the amount of carbon in the atmosphere through sequestration activities. On the other hand or on the other side of the climate issue, we can also look at adaptation. And what adaptation really is focused on is addressing the consequences of climate change. And in terms of focus areas on the adaptation side of things, really what we're looking at is increasing resiliency to temperature, increasing weather, and altered precipitation patterns. So that sort of gives you an overlay of the top half of the slide. So I'll focus on the mitigation side and in terms of the action areas, and then I'll try to get through the adaptation side. And like I said, if there's any questions, please do ask me. So in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, starting on the left of the slide there, really what we can do is we can identify actions that will reduce fossil fuel energy use and the emissions generated thereby. And we can also focus on increasing our generation and consumption of renewable energy or carbon-free energy. On the sequestration side of things, really what we're looking at this point, or what we can conceive at this point, or consider at this point, is probably the better word, are the using natural processes to take carbon out of the atmosphere through things like vegetation and tree planting and things like that. On the adaptation side of things, starting with the temperature in the middle of the slide, really what we're looking at is how can we reduce exposure, outdoor exposure to increasing temperatures, and how can we keep our buildings controlled in a comfortable environment, based on the impacts of outdoor temperature. What we can do then on the extreme weather side of things is we can look at how do we as a community withstand extreme weather events, and how do we respond to those events when they occur. And on the precipitation side of things, really what we're looking at is eliminate or reducing outdoor exposure where it makes sense to do so, enhancing stormwater management, and identifying policies and actions to manage drought when it occurs. So what I'm going to do right now is try to employ an example from the 2020 capital budget and walk you through how this lens actually works. So as part of the 2020 capital budget, there is a new fleet garage. And this slide should show up the various benefits that the climate lens will have picked up. So starting on my left, focus area greenhouse gas emissions. There's a number of things that we can do through this investment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with energy consumption. Things like enhanced insulation, high efficiency heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, LED lighting, and insulated high-speed garage doors, for example. What that will do is that would lower the energy profile of that facility, which would reduce the greenhouse gas or the fossil fuel profile associated with that building. But the other neat thing too is that when you focus on building envelope, you actually increase the building's ability to provide heat in the winter and cool in the summertime, and provide basically a comfortable environment for its occupants. On the adaptation side of things, we've got, so temperature is circled. We also can through the engineering and design stage of the procurement process, build the facility or design the facility to have an enhanced ability to withstand extreme weather. We can also design the facility on the precipitation side of things to withstand increasing levels of precipitation, which we are projected to experience as time goes on. The other interesting thing too is that when you do things like high-speed garage doors and you increase the ability of a facility to withstand extreme weather, you're actually also providing benefits from an emergency response point of view, because the building can work in adverse conditions, and say, for example, if there's some fire trucks or other emergency vehicles that are stored in the building, then the ability of the garage doors to open quicker actually reduces emergency response times. The other interesting benefits is when you look at this through a climate lens, you're also, as I mentioned earlier, enhanced occupant enhanced occupant comfort. The other interesting thing is when you do LED lighting inside of these facilities, you actually can increase productivity because of the better quality of lighting that you're providing to your mechanics. And obviously through energy efficiency measures, what you're doing is you're lowering the energy cost associated with running that facility, which should provide operational savings. So in terms of the 2020 capital budget, this is just a quick list of the 9 projects that are included in there. And what I've done is I've looked at the various projects from a mitigation and adaptation side of things, so bringing back those 5 focus areas from the previous slides. And I'll just go through them very quickly. So the Kale Drive is it's a road extension, but thanks to our new development standards, there will actually be vegetation integrated into this road development. Fleet Garage, we've already talked about. And you know, the Prosperity Way in 7th Line is not marked anywhere, but I would suggest that it contributes to the resiliency in the community's resiliency in the broader sense by supporting the growth of the tax base. Next Gen 911, that's the 4th one on the list, enhances emergency response time. Number 5, the intersection improvements. That's actually a roundabout, so that reduces greenhouse gas emissions associated with transportation, and it also has another added benefit of actually being a safer intersection format, which should increase community safety. So the volunteer paging, again, enhancing emergency response times. Round the River Trail supports active transportation. The LED conversion in our downtown areas is associated with lower energy use and costs, and park improvements enhances the attractiveness of the amenity. A couple of samples from the operating budget. So the community risk assessment that our fire services will be undertaking this year enhances emergency response. The second one, the CK Renovates programs. I'm pretty excited to see that on there, actually. It's a very exciting program from my perspective because it enables eligible homeowners to undertake energy efficiency upgrades for their homes. The stormwater model enhances our ability to manage stormwater. The transit investments, both the online smart card loading and the dispatch software will enhance the attractiveness of our transportation and transit system. Same thing with our sidewalk replacement program, the broadcasting of our municipal budget meetings. That will reduce greenhouse gas emissions while increasing accessibility to these meetings, to the community. And the drain maintenance and asset management programs, it's important to invest in our critical infrastructure. And the other neat thing that's happened as a result of these conversations with various departments is, for example, this new project that our engineering folks will be piloting this year, which is called Hot in Place. Don't know if you've heard about this, but it's a technology that allows you to regenerate old pavement in place. And without getting into too much of the technical details, it has a whole bunch of benefits from a lower energy perspective, from reducing the amount of aggregate that we use to maintain our roads, the reduction in transportation costs, because normally what you would have to do is take the old aggregate off, shift it to a plant, and bring new aggregate back in. And lower transportation, lower greenhouse gas emissions associated with that, and most importantly, a lower cost overall to maintain roads. So in terms of the next steps for this particular aspect of our climate action planning. So what we're planning on doing as part of this year is introducing some procedural enhancements as part of into the 2021 budget based on the input that we'll have received at that time through the community engagement process for the climate change action plan. So I am committed to providing a proposal to executive management by June of this year. The other thing that we're going to be looking at is procurement process enhancements to integrate climate change mitigation and adaptation in applicable projects. And the final climate conscious budget project and procurement evaluation framework will be developed as part of the climate change action plan. And the final product should be ready for council's review in June of 2021. So with that, I will end my presentation and open it up to questions.
Councillor Harrigan.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Gabe, for that presentation. I think this is a really good way to get budget started, conversation started. If you want to go back to the slide around the new fleet garage, I have some questions about how you think that approach could play out. The first question I have, and this is maybe more of a theoretical question, but can there not be an argument made, or could you describe the tension that takes place between this concept of like building new and sustaining old? So from an environmental perspective, and it may not directly relate to climate change, but there would be an argument to say as soon as you bring on something brand new, the material has to be produced, that's done in industry, there's tons of greenhouse gas emissions in industry, there's probably a boatload of plastic or other particles that are just generally speaking horrible for the world. Versus you have this building that is at what we would call end of life, and we're dumping a boatload of fund costs into kind of trying to sustain energy just to maintain a non-freezing temperature in it, for example. So can you talk about what that tension is, and then how an environmental or a climate lens might help us through that?
Yeah, I will do my best if I can. So the concept you're talking about, I believe, is this concept called embedded carbon, right? Which is the idea that every piece of material, this table included, has some sort of a carbon impact or carbon footprint, either positive or negative. This one has potentially a positive carbon footprint because it is actually made out of wood that sequestered carbon out of the atmosphere to build itself, right? So the concept of, and when you're building a new building, you're obviously using a whole bunch of material that you would not be using if you were maintaining an existing building, right? So there is that component to consider. I tend to look at things from a life cycle perspective when I compare these different options, and I would suggest that on the one hand we have to be cognizant of or we have to consider the use of the building, right? So what is it actually intended to do, and can it function as such? And what is the energy profile of option A versus option B? And what is the cost associated over its life cycle, right, versus option A versus option B. And it is my experience that when we get into these questions, we consider not only the environmental benefits, we consider the economic benefits, and particularly the end user benefits. So in this particular case, we're talking about mechanics and being able to maintain our fleet. So I honestly haven't done a I haven't gone into the research or, to take a look to compare building A versus, the new fleet. I would suggest that one of the challenges associated with retrofitting something that exists is that it may not have been built to its intended, to the use that we make of it right now. Therefore, it might actually be a detriment to try to, renovate it if its primary intended use is compromised, even if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So on the other hand, I would suggest that we kind of need to understand what the overall cost is, what the intent of the building is, what the environmental impacts are, and make a decision that considers all of those aspects.
Thank you. And then regarding the capital budget that we will, I'm sure, talk about later, with the new fleet garage that's proposed, is this something, so you had mentioned at I believe it was your last slide or your second last slide, that looking at including an environmental lens or some sort of form of evaluation of the environment in our procurement evaluation is actually expected to be June of 2021. Have you had conversations with engineering or perhaps with Thomas or his team in particular to look at how that could be done even ad hocly sooner rather than later?
We've definitely had some informal conversations, yes.
Okay,
yep.
Good. Thank you.
Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you. Through you, the chair. I guess my question was kind of answered. It was basically if we've quantified the decision between the existing building and the new building, but you kind of answered that at the end, saying that there hasn't been really kind of a comparison of the two. You're just kind of speaking of the benefits of a new building. But that was my question, which you've already kind of answered, and that was my major concern. But I think I'll leave. I think I'm okay for now.
Councillor Oche, followed by Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just ask, the intersection improvements to Queens Line and Merlin Road, is the roundabout based on the GHG emissions? Is that what why you're going with a roundabout instead of a light?
I will defer to Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Budget Chair. So the intersection improvements includes actually two phases. One is traffic signalization. We're going to look at that, and we're also looking at a roundabout. The advantages of the roundabout, as Gabriel mentioned, is that most of our fatalities and major accidents in a traffic signal are a result of a T-bone. And I think we've all done it. You see the yellow light, you want to get through the yellow light, and that's where the majority of accidents occur. When you have a roundabout, everybody's always going the same direction, so you only have deflection, you only have fender benders, basically. So you rarely, I'm not aware of any case actually where we've had a fatality on a roundabout. So there is a safety benefit. There's also a benefit to the fact from a environmental perspective that you don't have any cars idling, right, waiting for a traffic light. So that's a benefit as well. So the actual data I can't bring you specifically, but we feel overall that the roundabout at this particular intersection will probably be the favored design, but we're still going through the detailed evaluation.
Okay, I have some other questions, but I won't bring them up right now because it's not budget. But one is, if I could, is there a big difference in doing a roundabout? Because we obviously don't own the property, that we would have to buy some property to put a roundabout in because it's right at the bridge. And compared to putting lights in.
Yes, so thank you, Budget Chair. The one disadvantage of a roundabout is that typically you need more area. In this particular case, though, we have the area, we own the area, we do not have to purchase additional land.
3 years. Okay, actually, that's fine. I'll ask when that comes up. Thank you.
Councillor Solomon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. See if I can get that thing. I'd like to ask you about the sidewalk replacement, GHG emissions through the climate lens, if you will. I don't think I understand it. This is just replacement of existing sidewalks?
Yes, sir.
And how do you think that drives reduction in emissions?
Well, to be entirely fair, I would suggest that a sidewalk system that is in good repair increases the likelihood that people are going to use it.
Okay. And how, if it's repaired with concrete. Did you offset the emissions that come from the making of concrete?
Of course not. No. What the sidewalk replacement does is through the climate lens, as far as I can interpret it, or as far as I've interpreted, is it provides and it helps this community invest in an amenity that will increase the likelihood that people will walk to various places rather than using their cars.
Well, I just want to know what the justification was. Is that also part of our, we're going to have a capital budget discussion at some point, and one of the items in the capital budget is sidewalks, and this one's replacement. The other looks like it's new. That would be new sidewalks that people would use to walk on that aren't there now. It would be the theory, is that?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, but I think you have to, I don't see how you can measure it or be an effective measure unless you have the offset for the making of the concrete. It doesn't magically appear. There's energy used in the making of the concrete. I mean, there's carbon used in the making of the concrete.
Yes, absolutely. And Mr. Solomon, Councillor Solomon,
yeah.
The attempt is not, through this lens, the attempt is not to eliminate all carbon emissions, right?
No, that'd be a miracle.
At this point, it's a technological impossibility, right? And so that's why we wrote in, what is a climate lens? It's that the mitigation and adaptation benefits are considered and integrated when it makes sense to do so, right? At this point, we're not able to economically produce concrete that has a zero emissions footprint. No. But what we can do is we can invest in concrete infrastructure that increases the likelihood that our community will walk and use their bikes and, travel to work or to places of fun or, to home in using modes of transportation that are people-powered rather than fossil fuel-powered. right, which again has climate benefits, but very importantly has some tangible health benefits as well.
Okay, I just wanted to understand what the theory was behind it, so thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thanks, Gabe.
Thank you, everyone.
Next on our agenda, before we get to infrastructure and capital budget, I'll pass the microphone to Don for some information for some staff changes.
Thank you, Budget Chair. When we did the tabling of the initial budget, we presented to Council a summary of the staffing requests. Over the past week or more, when we received the public consultation and also a number of questions from Council, administration took that back. We listened to the feedback and wanted to propose some adjustments to how the staffing requirements could be considered. What it asked of Council is to allow Kathy Hoffman and Thomas Kelly to share with you some of the rationale for the leadership and system improvement positions, understand the rationale for that, and then Gord can provide a summary of some adjustments we can make. We believe it could eliminate some of the requested taxation impacts that were originally planned. But we appreciated the feedback from the community and from Council over the past week and change. So with that, Gord, I'm sorry, did you want Kathy to go in first and then we'll do the summary? Kathy, if I could ask you to start, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair, Council. Last week, we had the opportunity as staff members to attend all of the public information meetings, the consultation with the public on the budget. A number of you were out at those meetings, various meetings. Obviously, you couldn't double up and be at 2 meetings at one time, so you split yourselves up in order to be there. And so one of the places that I had the opportunity to attend last week was Blenheim. And during that particular evening, there was a woman by the name of Susan Robert who asked a question to the room, to the executive members that were present, the administrative team that was present that night. And she said it was during the time that we posted up the positions that are our new FTEs to be added this year as recommendations. And the question that she asked us so helpfully was, do we need these positions or are they nice to have? And what is it that would be, the benefit of these particular positions, and could the team speak to that? And so I wanted to bring a little bit of that conversation back to you tonight, just in general terms, but then also as it relates to the position that I'll speak to and then the positions that Thomas will speak to. And so I appreciated that Ms. Robert brought this into the room, because we know from the conversations that you're hearing from constituents that our staffing levels are always a question. What we pay staff is a question and things to be scrutinized and looked at. We're very aware that any time that the administrative team brings forward a recommendation for an increase in staff, that can sometimes mean an increase to the tax rate in order to achieve it. And so I wanted to share with you, as I did with Ms. Robert, that this team doesn't ever bring a nice-to-do position forward. When we go through our budget deliberations at the executive team level, we scrutinize very closely to see whether or not asking for an additional FTE, whether that is temporarily or permanently, is a good idea and good for the business. And when I say good for the business, I mean good for the ratepayers that pay for the wage. Everything that brings us here is about making sure that we're providing a service to the community in an effective and efficient way. And so if it doesn't meet that litmus test, then it doesn't get brought before you. Having said that, we appreciate that you're in the very difficult situation of having to make decisions about why it is that what to fund and what not to fund, and always have to make some priorities, just in the same way that as a team we make recommendations to you about things to fund and recommendations about what not to fund. Our staff view these positions, are certainly committed to them, and I can tell you that a number of our staff are sitting in the gallery this evening because it's just that important to them to be here and hear this conversation and hear your views on this. In fact, some of the people that we'll talk about in our presentations this evening are here just in the spirit of their commitment to our organization and to our public. And so with that, I'll just dive into my particular position that's here under the HROD area. This position is referred to as an HR generalist position. The quick history on that is that in the 2019 budget, this particular item came before you as a base budget request. It was a particularly difficult year as well as it related to positions, and where council ultimately decided last year was rather than move it to a base budget request, you agreed to support this position as a one-time supplemental request for 2019. This position's back in front of you this evening for a request for your consideration for it to be placed in the base budget this year, as opposed to a supplemental request. And I want to share with you that what happened with this position last year in 2019 was, and we did some long analysis on this position essentially paid for itself in 2019. Based on the projects that we had this position involved with, we were able to avoid cost and reduce costs. I can give you a couple of examples, one of them related to audits that we did in our benefit plan early in the year to achieve some savings for the position. The position was also highly involved in automating, going through, taking some of our required health and safety training for supervisors and joint health and safety committee members, and was effective at taking 8-hour in-class training sessions and bringing them into 2-hour online courses. We have a number of those that we still would like to get our way through. Each one of those saved us about $36,000 to be able to move to that as one other example. There are several examples like this that I could itemize for you, but I think you probably get the picture. We were very pleased that this particular position did in fact cover its own costs, and we have the same types of projects of opportunity to make a difference to the front line of our supervisors, et cetera, who are delivering service, and to be able to have this position again pay for itself in 2020. And so our serious and passionate ask is that you consider this position in the base budget, and you'll hear more in a moment about our ideas on how to fund that. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Budget Chair. Thank you, Council. The first two positions you see for the Engineering and Transportation Division are existing positions we have today. They are both supplemental, so they will end in about 1 year's time for us. Our request is to make those base. The third position, the Engineering Manager, is a new ask. It's a new position for us. So first with the Engineering Technologist, grade 9 position, all of these jobs are really to support our growth strategy and to support our asset management plan. Within the engineering group, we are responsible per the government regulation OREG 588/17, that's the asset management plan. We have to adhere to certain standards. Our next deadline and submission to the province is July of next year, so about a year and a half away. This position allows us to do the complete database management, to monitor all of our infrastructure information, to put in the as-built drawings, to look at our transit data, all our roads, our bridges, trails, traffic signs. Every asset that we own, buildings, goes in this database. This position is responsible for loading that information, keeping track of it, and the benefit to us as a municipality is that we can pull up anytime and know exactly what data we have, what the attributes, what the performance, what the condition is. So this is an ongoing project for us. It's something that's never going to end for us because things are always changing. So with that, if we're not able to move forward with this position, the risk is that we essentially lose one headcount within the engineering group, and our submission and our ability to keep up with the asset management plan per the province requirements is at risk. It's simply we can't handle the amount of volume that we're currently seeing. The next position, which is the Business Solution Analyst, this is a grade 8 position, and it's a position that we presented to you last year as a base, but it was changed during the budget deliberations to a supplemental. This is a position that's been in place for about 5 years. We've had 4 people in this position, and it's a highly technical position. They're responsible for primarily our J.D. Edwards program. They also do some transit fare management for us. They're responsible for all of the training, the testing on upgrades, help desk, reporting, system optimization as well. And really the J.D. Edwards software is the heart and soul of our asset management plan. If we were to outsource this project, unlike the first FTE, which we could now not outsource, this one we could. Typically, our consultants charge $165 an hour, or that would equate to $300,000 per year. So the benefits of bringing it in-house, first of all, you get much better service, but it's also at a third of the price. One other benefit that is not mentioned in your briefing note is that I talked to my colleague, the general manager of PUC. This particular person supports not only Public Works and Fleet, but they also support the PUC. The PUC are prepared to fund a third of that. And Gord, did you make that adjustment on there? No, it's still at 110. Yeah, next slide. So approximately 36,000 of that would come off based on that support from the PUC. So it takes about 6 months of training to get this person up to speed. So it's been a real problem for us because as soon as a full-time position comes up, and we have many of them, Kathy will talk later about some of the turnover we're seeing and some of the retirements, that person always applies for the full-time job and we lose them. So that's why it's really important for us to make this a full-time position. The last position is the engineering manager, and this is a new position. It is really in support of Council's growth strategy. There's no opportunity to outsource this particular projects. In the briefing note, I talk about some of the increased activity that we've had. It's all really good news, by the way. So, for example, with the developments that are going on, we've seen, we were at 4 active developments that we monitored within our group. In 2017, last year we were at 20. So a 5 times increase on the single lot developments, we've actually gone from 12 to 21. So we've doubled. This particular management position is a requirement from the standpoint, it's just, again, the volume of work that we have seen, the increase. We've also, through Council's direction, moved a lot of the work in-house, particularly with our bridges, where we're now designing almost all the bridges less than 4 meters. That's been a savings, but with that, there needs to be some management of these people and some expertise as well. We typically see in the range of 15 to 30% savings by bringing this work in-house. If this position is not funded, it really will impact our service level. Right now, we have a number of developers coming to us, and they're looking for quick turnaround time. Our target is 1 week to turn that around. Our engineering team are responsible for really the adherence of all of the consulting designs that come into the municipality to ensure they meet our development standards. You may recall that just this past year, we came to you with a new development standard. So our team will sit down with the consultant, review the drawings, make recommendations. They will also go on site to ensure that everybody, all the contractors are building as they said they would per the drawing. So it's a really important position for us. It ensures, first of all, the municipality has certain standards and that they're to a safe level as well. So this position is really to manage some of that growth to help us through that. And, you know, if you look at it just overall, that our infrastructure dollars continue to go up. Our demand on infrastructure continues to go up. So we need some people to help manage that. So that's what we're asking for. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Budget Chair. So I just to add to this, the entire executive team recommended these positions back in November when we were developing the budget because we knew that they all pay for themselves. Whether it's through the efficiencies or being able to get more work done on our asset management plan, or even to be available to apply for future infrastructure funding. If our asset management plan isn't to the next level by 2022, we no longer can get the federal gas tax money, the provincial gas tax money, or any one-time grant application for infrastructure moving forward. And as Thomas said, has just indicated, Council has put a lot of money into infrastructure since the adoption of our asset management plan in 2017. More money means more projects, and that's where the management and tracking comes in, along with needing another tech. In Kathy's area, it's the same. We've all the GMs at EMT see the savings of this position, whether it's, but a lot of it's not monetary, but getting somebody back to work instead of taking sick days or things like that. It might not show up on our financial statements, but we know we're having a happier workforce and getting things going on the HR front helps. And so we've all agreed as GMs to find funding internally for the HR generalist. And we are recommending that the 3 jobs that Thomas talked about, 2 of them be funded from some of the new funding in the asset management plan. So in this budget, we've recommended over $5 million of new funding for our asset management plan. We're recommending that the engineering tech be funded completely from that. As Thomas said, the engineering business solution analyst, we've received 1/3 funding from the PUC, with 2/3 out of the asset management plan, and the engineering manager to also be funded from the asset management plan. There's one-time costs for computer equipment, phones, whatever, that's what's ever needed. So there's $11,670 of one-time cost. We recommend that funded from the Strategic Development Reserve. This is the EMT's suggestion right off the bat before we made a decision today to bring this at the beginning for your consideration, and I pass it over to the budget chair.
Do we have a summary of what the change in impact is from the original recommendation to this revised recommendation?
Yeah, so it's the $434,206 in the base,
okay,
and $11,670 one time.
Okay. And would we require a motion to adopt the revised recommendation, or to put that in place of the original recommendation? Yes. Okay. Councillor Harrigan?
I'll move the recommendations.
Second by Councillor Latimer.
Pleased.
I'm sure we'll have a couple of questions. Councillor McGregor?
Thank you, and through the budget chair. So in our tab is this, in our staffing recommendations, summary of recommended staff changes, 9F. At the total of that bottom of that page, it shows grand total base and one time 645,061 with 13.22 new FTEs. Now this is after taking out the other FTEs of paid FTEs or funded FTEs. So that's where we're at. So this motion that they have here then leaves a balance, if I'm getting this correct. So we're taking the 434,206 off that 645,061, leaving us a balance of 210,855. Is that correct? That is still in the budget towards our increase, correct?
Yes, this is removing the 4 base requests. There are, when we get through going through the detailed lines, there are still some supplementary requests that make up the rest. But these are the base requests of new FTEs.
Okay. It just concerns me because, and I know we have growing infrastructure problems and needs within our community, but we have declining population or an aging population. We have a declining tax base that we're dealing with, yet we continue to add positions into the municipality. I don't disagree whatsoever that these positions are needed, but I cannot convince myself that these positions could not be somehow fulfilled within individual departments. And I know the motion's already been put on the floor, so should this motion choose to fail, I would be bringing a motion that would suggest that all $645,061 be removed from the budget total, and that these positions be found within interdepartments as they apply to each position within here.
Councillor Oche?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Gord. I heard you say if we do not have our asset management plan where it's at, we'll be cut off the federal and provincial gas tax. I remember last term that we were talking and we were well ahead of other people as far as that goes. So has anybody been cut off yet that you're aware of?
So it's now a requirement of every grant program to have an asset management in place. So, for example, the one that we just applied for our Sportsplex project, question number 1 is your asset management plan in place and up to standards? If you can't answer that box, you can't apply. And what we know is the federal government, through the federal gas tax, is tightening up those requirements for effective in 2022, I believe, or late 2021 or 2022. Thomas probably has more details on that, but we know that the requirements are getting more and more, and we're not eligible for grants, for infrastructure grants, without an asset management plan in place to that level. Thomas might have some more information.
Thanks, Gord. Thanks, Thomas. Sure.
Councillor Sakachi?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just had a couple quick questions in regards to the revised recommendations. So the third of the salary, is that going to be something that the PUC is going to be paying ongoing, or is that just this time? This is.
Yeah, yes, Thomas has been in discussion with them in the last day or so, and they've committed to base funding.
And then the second question would relate to, so is this something that we're going to continue to fund under new asset management, or is this something that's going to be taking out one time? Because I don't foresee some of the challenges we're facing now kind of ending this year. So I was just curious to see, like, moving forward, is this something that's going to be, base, or is this something that we're going to continue to try to fund it in the new asset management?
So these positions are needed permanently to manage the assets. So this is a permanently funded. They wouldn't come back next year like the two jobs on this list have come back from last year when they were one-time funded. This is to permanently fund.
Sorry. I guess maybe I didn't ask the question. So I understand that aspect, but when we continue to fund these positions, if this motion that's been accepted, is that funding going to be out of the base budget, though, or is this the only time we're going to be funding it out of the asset management plan, correct?
Right.
I understand
what we're saying is out of some of the new funds that council is allotting that we had proposed for council allot to the asset management plan, we had $5 million of new funding in this budget proposed to go to our life cycle plan. We're going to carve back about $350,000 for these three. Sorry, less the 1/3 PUC, so about just over $300,000 for these three positions out of that to permanently fund these positions in base.
And I guess I know that there's, when we're talking to, someone like yourself, the numbers, when you present them, we try to be as concrete as possible. But what I would like to see, though, is that it would be pretty beneficial to me is if there could be some, I know you can't exact, but estimations that it would, that you would see in savings. I know we can talk about the hourly rate of consultants, and we can talk about the effectiveness of saving, the money that can be saving, for instance, in like the HR position. But it would be, intangible for me to have those numbers in front of me, because it would sure make my decision a lot easier. Because I know the first year when we were sitting around this table, we were concerned about the amount of money that we were paying in consulting fees. So to see that we're saving that money, or to hear that is one thing, but to see it in front of us, I think would help a lot of us be able to make a decision if we see that these positions are actually paying for themselves, because we all know how difficult it is to add new positions. But I've been in conversation with a lot of developers that have even saying that they really see us as the upturn. So that's why I struggle with adding a position, but I also struggle with them not potentially getting the service. So I appreciate your comments. And like I said, if there's a way we could have it, when we're doing this next year, that we could see kind of, an estimation of the savings or the estimation of the costs. I know, Kathy, you had a great response to Miss Robert at the Blenheim. But, the one thing is to talk about it, but to actually see those savings that we've seen in, benefits and, wherever it would be, I think would be beneficial. So and I really appreciate your comments in Blenheim as well. Thank you.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a series of questions, but they're not very long. First is procedural. When we add things to base, it requires a positive motion, correct? You've got to bring a motion and it's got to pass, as opposed to the other way where you're removing things. Is that right?
We can check on that.
That was my easy one. Okay. Well, I got another easy one. We were talking about funding, because really you've got to figure out how to fund all these things. Does all the OLG money go into the general tax fund, if I can call it that, rather than going into any special reserves or any special slush funds or anything? It goes into the bottom line?
General revenue.
Every dime of it. And that includes the OLG money plus any tax assessment money and probably the building permit money. Okay. Good. That was my second easy one. If you fund from the asset management plan as you suggested, what else doesn't get done as a result of that?
We would have $350,000 less money available to do specific projects. The challenge that Mr. Kelly's pointing out is if he doesn't have some additional people to actually plan those projects, that's going to be a pinch point for him as well. So we're trying to find a way to make the best use of the available funding without increasing the tax rate.
Right, but okay. So back to now a comment or two. I assume that something doesn't get done if you take the money, the $300,000 out, but I'm not hearing what that is. Am I going to hear about that later at some point in time?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So what will happen is that we'll be looking at our workload, and some of our infrastructure upgrades can't wait as well, right? If there's a bridge that needs to be done, a road needs to be upgraded, we need to move forward. We will go back and look at the options to outsource this to a consultant. So in your asset management plan, in your life cycle plan, we do this all the time, that we outsource to a consultant when we need additional capacity or expertise. And we pay for their engineering out of the life cycle fund. What I'm asking for is, with these three positions, that we take that money and rather than paying it to a consultant, we do it internally. And we do so at a savings as well.
But when you use a consultant, it's not in base budget, correct? Is that right?
That fund comes from our reserves, which is our life cycle planning, which is our 50% funded. That's where we get that money, and it's funded by the higher levels of government as well. So it's one big reserve. We have 71 categories we look at, of which bridges is one, roads is another, gravel roads is another, and we have reserves set up for those. So all of that money is coming from that reserve, which is coming from the tax base.
Okay, I've got a question through you, but did you have that other answer? Is that why you were looking at me?
Nope.
Oh,
not yet.
Okay.
I'll interrupt you when we do.
So the public understands, if I'm understanding this correctly, you would do that out of reserve, But if you pass this motion tonight, you've just added 4 people in perpetuity. Right? Once they're in that, I haven't seen people come out of the base budget too easily.
We've actually brought people out of the base budget for a number of years. One year we took over 19 people out of child services. I've had people come out of the CAO's office since I've been the CAO. So yes, we have reduced. That's not true.
Good, and that's what I wanted the answer from you, because I think what you should really be doing, here's my comment on it, I think our staff, we should respect their priorities. They're the operating people. And if this is their priority, then they should do this. But they should find other things. You can't tell me, and I don't think the public believes. You heard Mr. Hacker, and he's not the only one who says that. Sue Robert, who I know also very well, you heard her comments, and I hear it on the street every day, every place I go, that when we add people, they stay. Now, I know that they don't always, but if the priorities change, then you should do exactly what you just said, Mr. Shropshire, and we should challenge our departments to remove, if this is their priority, then find it within the department. The things that you don't need, or you need less, then that's what should pay for this. That's what I hear from the public. And I think it's in keeping with what Councilor McGregor just said. But that's generally what we hear in the public, and that's what we're here to do, is to reflect the constituents' needs while at the same time respecting the professional advice we get. So if this is a priority, fine, but find it within the existing budgets. Because there must be things, you can't tell me that everything, that as one priority comes forward, you got to keep everything that you've got. I mean, you can tell me that, but I'm not buying.
Thank you for the confidence in terms of setting the priorities, and that really is sincere. That's appreciated. And we've also heard about the concerns about the rising staff levels. I think Gord and the team have a summary just over the last 7 years, just to give council and the taxpayers some additional information and context for the comments that were just shared. So we would do everything we could to actually provide additional information, priorities, or to readjust priorities, but at a certain level, our staffing requirements are tied to service levels that have also been established by council. So if I knew right now, or any of our senior management team that are sitting in the room that prepared the budget and are defending it, knew that there was space in the budget to start making adjustments without affecting service levels, that would already be in front of you on the table. So we have, I think, an opportunity to also explain and to answer council's questions about where service levels are created. So I know that that's it's easy to look at a budget of, somewhere in the order of 1,350 staff, but when you look at the number of people that we have at RVG and the number of people that we have doing snowplow removal and so on, those staff are tasked to do requirements that are meeting council service expectations. So I'd be happy to have council ask for any of those questions, but if council's direction is to, keep our staff levels the same and deal with the existing budgets, that's the direction we'll have. But we do expect that we're going to come back to it at some point and say there is going to be a potential impact on service levels, and then we need council's direction as to where that is. I mean, you set service levels and the budget, and I know that's a hard discussion, but I'm also confident that we don't have a lot of padding. We will never stop looking for continuous improvement. We've made that commitment to you, and I think the entire team is committed to that. But
okay.
I'll take a stab at an answer to that question. So when we go to the tab items, you're right about the positive versus negative removal. I think this is just a motion that alters funding position, or alters the funding source for the positions. So isn't a removal or an addition, it's a alteration of funding source. So I think that's the summary.
So to do this, we need a positive motion. Do this right now, you need a motion.
Yeah, so this was moved.
What happens if the motion fails?
So then it would the recommendation in the folder would remain the same, but as this is a committee meeting, we could still revisit it and alter it in any way that we saw fit.
Or you might have another motion that suggests another way to do it.
Yeah, I recall a few times we've voted on the same motion several times. So,
okay, thank you. I just wanted to know.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Pinstone.
Thank you. Just to confirm, my knowledge and for people who might be hearing about things like our asset management plan for the first time. Gord, can you or Steve explain to us how our asset management plan, how that funding grows every year, and then also if there is a reference line in our current budget or tabs that would speak to the asset management plan?
Yeah, so tab 4 in your budget is where we're talking about the funding for the asset management plan. If you count the inflation as well, that's how I'm getting at. We're adding $5 million to the budget this year. So over the last, keep in mind Chatham-Kent didn't often hear comments back to staffing levels. We didn't manage these projects before we've decided to bring for engineering. We've decided to bring these in house because we can save money and be much more efficient by managing them ourselves. So if we've gone from, and I'm just choosing numbers off the top of my head, if we've gone from 20 million in our asset management plan, our life cycle plan in 2010, and now we're up to 50 million a year. And we're taking it in house and not hiring the consultants for every bridge anymore, and the things that we used to do all outsourced. It's natural that it takes more staff to manage all those projects, and that's what Thomas has come in this budget asking for.
So another way of, we're right now talking about funding it out of the new asset management plan, but another way that this could be lined out in the budget. For example, line number 87 in tab 4 talks about how we're putting $775K from expired debentures over into AMP. We could have also said, well, we're going to put 400 into AMP and take the other 350, or put 350 into the AMP and take the other 400 to fund these net new positions without tax implication.
Exactly, that's.
And then to follow up from that, I will assume that these positions are then not aligned to any asset in particular with the asset management plan, or will we see revenue? So for example, the engineering tech, let's say that person is the bridge portfolio gal, and she's only going to be working on bridges. I know that's not the case. Maybe it's 30, 30, or 20, however that's like. Are you going to be reporting that spend in asset management, or are we formally going to be pulling those out of asset management life cycle because we're saying that money is going to be for staff? I guess I'm asking if you're going to continue to formally report these people as life cycle at AMP. Doesn't matter to me what answers.
So our intention would be they would go into the base budget for labor for the infrastructure and engineering services team.
Right. Do our management and hire, or do our staff track the projects that they're working on in terms of time allocation?
We do, certainly, with all of our service level agreements. We don't as much. It's something we could go back and acquire, though. But we don't, as a rule, have an assignment of every bridge gets a certain project code, and then we log all of our hours against that. We have one labor line item which we manage to.
Just as an offhanded comment, I once worked for an organization who started to insist on tracking time to projects and found significant efficiencies after people started to assign their half-hour blocks of time towards projects. So that could be something we can think about for future. Outside of this, and this may or may not be appropriate, there's also a manager position that engineering had identified to be funded through increased revenues. So there was also a zero tax impact. So how many managers would we have in the engineering, managers and directors would we have in the engineering department should this go through successfully? Sorry, that's an on the spot, but.
Thank you, Budget Chair. Is your question for engineering and transportation only, or is it for all IES?
Let's go engineering and transportation only.
So we currently have 2 managers in engineering and transportation. This would be 3, and we have 1 director.
And then that other manager of drainage falls under the IES category.
That's correct. That falls under our drainage asset and waste and recycling portfolio, headed up by Tim Dick.
I retract my first answer. What about IES in total?
I need to
think about it.
Give me a minute.
Yep,
yeah.
that's okay. While Thomas is thinking about it, and sorry, because I do know I have access to an org chart and I could probably find that information out myself, but I think it's important to have the conversation more publicly. So on the one hand, I think that it's, there's lots of zero budget items that we've seen in this budget where the GM or their director have found efficiencies in order to achieve their departmental goals. And I think that is an excellent thing. I also think that looking at sources of funding to fund initiatives where we are directly aligning staff people to work and production, especially in engineering services, this is, for me, a creative solution to achieve our goals without having to download that burden onto taxpayers themselves. So I initially had sent some emails out with a motion similar to what Councillor C. McGregor had hinted at earlier in our discussion tonight, but I think with this, I'm confident that not only are these, especially the engineering positions, but these positions are important for us to achieve our asset management goals. We have a number of plans in place, one specifically in my ward on stormwater, that if we don't have the strategy and the people in place to execute those master plans, then there's really no point in funding the master plans in the first place. So I'm happy to support this because I think it demonstrates that we're setting our priorities without downloading those priorities onto our taxpayers. I think you might have an answer now on the management.
So within the entire infrastructure and engineering services, we have approximately 440 employees. That's full-time, part-time. We have a total of 10 managers, and this would add 2 to that mix to 12.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pinsonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, just to be clear, tab 6, everything is already in that 4.99 number, is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So
we budgeted to pay them out of tax dollars, these
right.
4 positions and that. So this
but
is
these ones now, you're saying are going to be found within existing budgets. So technically, all those line items will come out of tab 6, correct? Like 440,000, whatever it is?
Yeah, just alternative funding. So the human resources generalists, we're going to, as a group of GMs, find from
existing
lines
funds
in our existing budget, and from for the 3 under Thomas, one third of the one's going to be funded from the PUC, and the rest is going to come out of the asset.
Right.
So there's about $300,000 of the new money going to asset management plan, and whether it's from retiring debt or whatever we can talk about it's from, but out of new money that was in the budget dedicated to asset management plan, we're looking at taking $300,000 to fund these positions.
I don't have a problem with the first 3. They're existing now, and if you're going to find it within your existing budget. I do have a problem with the manager position. Is there if this passes, is there a way later to deal with that particular item, or can we separate it out?
So because this is budget committee, once we pass a motion, you can make any other motion. There's no like 2/3 vote required. Yeah. So with these in particular, when we get back through the tabs, you could take a look at them again, alter in any way that we wanted to with a motion at that point too. So unlike council, we don't have to go through a 2/3 vote. It's not final once the motion's passed. We can still continue to revisit it.
Problem is, I want to support the first 3. I don't want to support the 4th one. Can we split them out right now?
We can do that.
Okay.
And I think maybe to your question, you were maybe beating around the bush on what the impact would be to that 499 right now.
Correct.
So if this passed, it would then be 471.
Okay.
Councillor Kirkwood-White, did I see your hand as well?
You did. I had a very similar question related to Steve's question with regard to the can we do this differently? But I also had a question with regard to somewhere in this 3-inch binder, there's a reference to $700,000 being used to help with a backlog of, and does that in any way impact the discussion that we're having right now?
No, it's a totally separate discussion. All right.
Councillor Oche?
Thank you. I'll make this short, Chair. So, Gord, if I may, or Thomas, actually, I think mentioned that. So next year, this would be in base budget, not under asset. So next year, we're looking at a $400 and some odd increase to base budget right off, like before we get close to that budget. Okay.
Oh, that's I got out of that conversation.
Thank you for that. The second question I have is, I don't know the grades, like grade 9.6 or 8.6 or 11.6, but is there a reason why we started off at those numbers? To whoever could answer that for me, I'm not sure. Right now I'm looking at tab 9F, all of these positions.
Mr. Budget Chair, I think I could maybe answer that just in the general sense. Councillor, when we're budgeting for positions, we budget at the top rate of the position, and then we also carve away employees who start at a lower rate in the variance during the course of the year. So the variance of that gets captured, but we budget for what would be the full cost of that position.
Right. So if, say this goes through and you hired somebody in March, so they wouldn't necessarily start off at 11.6, is that what you're saying?
They wouldn't necessarily start off at the step 6, that's right.
Okay. And each point, I'm assuming, is a little bit higher. I notice everything ends in 0.6. There's no 5.5 or 8.5. Is there a reason why they ended?
So the 6 just represents the step in a grade. So the way our non-union grid works is that we have a series of grades, and within each grade there are various steps that one progresses through based on their experience and service.
So an 8.6 would make more than an 8.5?
That's right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan?
Sorry, just to clarify on Councillor Oche's question, I want to ask it differently. So this year, because of the recommendations, there will be no tax implication if this passes to these positions, correct? And then next year, yes, there will also be no tax implications to these positions because we've already allocated those AMP dollars for eternity, for lack of a better word.
That's correct.
Right, so we're not deferring the cost to next year's tax base.
That's correct.
Right, okay. So there's no tax implication this year or in future years.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Bondi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only difficulty I have with this is the business solution analyst. We're suggesting that we hire this person in base. So effectively, all three of them really, although two of them are already there, but we're making this decision based on a prediction of consulting fees by the sounds of it, because Thomas, as you said, the business solution analyst, if we were to outsource this to a consultant, it would cost 3 times as much based on an hourly rate of a consulting firm. But that's presuming that we have the consultant 5 days a week, all year long, correct, if the math?
Yes, that's correct, but that's the current load on this person. It's a full-time role, and it's one that we currently have in place. This is not a new position. It's one that's been in the supplemental budget. And
I understand that. Yeah, and this is to put it in base, right?
Yeah, we've had a turnover of people. It's an absolute critical position to our operations, and if we were to lose this, the risk is that we can't do any work orders, we can't do any purchase orders. It's that type of thing. It's a vital piece of software to our business operations.
So out of 140 staff, if you were to lose this person, sounds like the department would almost come to a standstill, which I don't know. That seems like a very important position, obviously. So I guess my concern is, if these positions were not put into base, you talk about an impact to service. So what impact would there be to the average taxpayer? Because when you say that there would be an impact service, well, we get that. If we make cuts, there's obviously going to be a consequence to cuts. That's why we're here. Well, usually not, but what would be the actual consequence to somebody that wants to build a home? Or, well, I guess maybe you should tell me.
Yep. So the first thing is it's spending our tax dollars more efficiently. because we're bringing that service in-house. We can have full control of that service, and we can do it at less cost than outsourcing it. That's the first thing. So there's actually a cost benefit to the taxpayers. The second thing, if you want to start with the engineering manager, we've made a strong effort from previous councils to move work in-house. We're also seeing quite an uptick in all the work that's required. So, for example, the engineering manager, all of our commercial developments that we currently work with, I would need your support that when we can't turn things around in the timing that they require, it's because we don't have enough staff to do that. That position cannot be outsourced. It's looking at the current developments and making sure they adhere to our standards. It's strictly an internal job. So the uptick in all of our growth that we've talked about is wonderful, but we have more work coming in from developers, from commercial and industrial developers. And we meet regularly with them. We go through these details. We go to their sites. We make sure everything is done properly. So there would be, I would say, a slowdown in the growth because your engineering group couldn't support it as quickly as we needed to. The other positions are really, I talked about the business solution analyst, and I want to mention that that's a critical job for the PUC. Absolutely. If Tim was here today, Tim Sutherland, he would say the same. With regard to the GIS technologists, this is really in support of our asset management plan. Where do we get the savings? We can now have a database that we can rely on. We can determine where our assets are at, and that's the benefit. And finally, as Gord mentioned, we can tick that box with the province that says, yes, our asset management plan is on schedule according to the provincial guidelines, and the next milestone is July of 21. So those are the benefits. That last position, too, is another one that I can't outsource anywhere. I can't call a consultant. This is internal work that needs to be done to load all of that information on a GIS system.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Actually, while I have the floor, Mr. Chair, maybe this is for Gord. There's been some question about the money from the railway. Could you just explain, because people have asked me, so we've got this $5 million from the railway, and frankly, I don't know the answer. I've heard it's an in and out, but if we got a check for $5 million, and if we did borrow the money, did we borrow the money internally? Like, did the WDC borrow the money from the municipality? And if so, over the course of the 8 years of ownership or so, wouldn't there be some equity in that? So if you just clear that up, because we're trying to raise taxes, and people are asking me, well, what happened to the $5 million from the railway? Gord?
The municipality loaned a company called WDC Rail that we created $5.3 million over the course of many years. Started at the purchase price, but then we've added more, council's added more at several stages as we had to pay for the operating costs. So in total, over the years, we've loaned that money, $5.3 million. We got a check in the bank in late December back in WDC Rail for $5.2 million. So overall, it's $100,000 short. We'll have a detailed report coming to a council meeting in March with all the financial details. But basically, we're now able to pay back that internal loan short $100,000.
So there's no found money for the municipality?
We're down $100,000,
right.
and it was never budgeted for.
So pretty much a wash then?
So it's a wash.
Sorry, I'll just speak on behalf of Councillor Oche. Councillor Oche is asking where's the money at, but presumably you're saying it's just the WDC paid off the loan to the municipality? So the WDC folds, pays off its loan, and it's $100,000 one way or the other.
So this was never budgeted for in the beginning. When we bought WDC Rail, we didn't budget for it. We didn't pull the money out of a reserve to pay for it. We just took it out of our bank account and loaned it to the WDC Rail company, and now they're paying back the loan short $100,000.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Councillor Finn?
Councillor Bondi took half of mine. With the ones that could be outsourced, you said that you'd have to do it. Would there be a delay in any services if you had to outsource it? And if you had to pay for those outsourcings, where would that money come from?
So the only one of those positions which could be outsourced would be the BSA one, noted in line 125. That's the only one that we would have the opportunity. That's the one we looked at. Would instead of 110,000 per year internal, it would be 300,000 per year. This is a full-time job. This gentleman keeps the wheels on the bus for us, basically running, and it's a critical position for us. And the concern, what we ran into last year and previous years, is that if we continue to make it a supplemental request, I have significant turnover, and I don't blame anyone for bidding on a full-time job, and they usually get it because they're highly qualified people, strongly technical. You cannot find J.D. Edwards people off the street. So that's why it's so important for us.
But if you had to pay for them, where would that money come from? Would it also come from the asset management plan?
Yeah, logically, it would also come from that same source, yeah. So rather than taking 110,000 out of the asset management plan, I would take probably 300,000. And I wouldn't get the same level of service. Whenever you deal with a consultant, you've got to set up a contract. They're usually in Toronto. You have to call them. They come down. They spend time, right? It's much more expensive. You don't get the same service level. They don't understand our business as well as someone internally would as well.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So the asset management plan funding, is there provincial or federal dollars that go into this? I think I understand it was.
Yes, we get
50%
towards our projects and base funding that we can count on. We get about 5.3 million OCAF funding from the province and about 6 points something, like off the top of my head, from the federal gas tax. So there's around 11 million coming in a year that we can count on year after year after year for assets.
I guess what I'm getting at, I'm trying to figure out here is that if we didn't put it through the asset management funding plan, the whole I'll just use the engineering manager at this moment, the whole $122,000 would come out of our pocket, where if we put it through that funding, there's a percentage of it is actually coming from provincial and federal funding.
Yes, correct. Roughly 20% is coming from other sources of government.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one question for Thomas. Thinking about some conversations that I've had with the KFA over the past week, would a fair summary of your argument be that with the amount of money we were budgeting for infrastructure, these positions allow us to complete the most number of projects with that amount of funding?
Yes, that's a good description as well.
Okay. And do we have these separated out for voting? Okay. So I will call the question on the first one. So that's the HR generalist for 87303.
Just a point of order, were we going to separate everyone individually or just the top three and the bottom one?
Councillor Pinsnow, what was your request? Okay. So we'll vote on the
easier.
Yeah, we'll vote on the top three first. Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. So please indicate your vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-2.
Okay, and we'll move on to the last item. Please indicate your vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 10-8.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to move into the capital budget. We're looking for a hard stop around 10 after 8, quarter after 8, because we have to move into closed session for a few items. So just keeping timing in mind as we're going through some of these questions. So this has been referred to budget, so we can ask any questions about any of these items. If someone wants to move the budget as presented, that's an option as well. We're on move the capital budget, not the budget. No, sorry. You can do that if you want, but. Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On item 12, the Thames River, and I ask this every year, I didn't realize that we'd already give the green light. And this is the third time now we're putting another $4.25 million into it. Does this, if this capital budget passes, does that mean that Phase 3 is approved?
Yes, that's exactly right. We normally would approve this at a council meeting, but council deferred it to the budget meeting to discuss these items. So now we're approving these items at a budget meeting.
Okay, can I move that number 12 be removed from the capital budget projects list?
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Councillor Wright? Any questions on this motion, comments? Councillor Bondi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thomas, I assume. So we have completed Phase 1 and Phase 2?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So I just put up a sketch here. So what you see in the green, that is completed now. That's what Mr. Liguori was talking about, the Greenfield ethanol trail. And that's completed up about 1.5 kilometers or so past the Bear Line. We have already, in process this year, we'll be completing a portion of the south side, which takes us up to Bloomfield Road. And this amount of money is being asked to really complete the rest of the trail.
So you're going to complete a portion of the south side, so it's not going to be contiguous, like Phase 1 and Phase 2 don't follow one another?
Yes, they do. If I could just pull up one other slide.
Well, it doesn't. How could it?
So what you see here is in the green top on the north side is the Phase 1. Phase 2 is noted below. That's what's going to take place this year. Council has already approved that amount. And then on the next slide is essentially completing the rest of the trail up to the Prairie Siding Bridge.
So Phase 1 and Phase 2 don't connect to each other?
No, not at this time. Phase 3, which we're asking for approval, will allow that connection.
So wouldn't it have been logical to do Phase 1 and Phase 2, that, just in case Phase 3 doesn't pass, it's there? You understand what I'm saying? Wouldn't it have? I just don't understand why Phase 1 and Phase 2 wouldn't have connected to one another.
Okay, I understand the question now. Thank you, Budget Chair. The reason is really based on a need and a request. In particular, that south side is very busy as well. It serves a number of industry that people ride a lot of their bicycles there. So it's there for safety manners, but to get people to the Bloomfield section. And with that allows us to have a trail which starts on the north down to Bloomfield. We have a multi-use trail there, right out front of the Greenfield Ethanol, along with Truly Green. And then we also have a bike lane on Richmond. So a lot of the employees in that area have a number of staff that are very use active transportation. So that's why that was a high priority for us to get that done first.
Okay, sure, that makes sense. Presumably you have, because you always do, data on usage. Because if we ever ask for a stoplight, there's always a study that tells us how many people, what time of day. So how many people use this thing?
Thank you, Budget Chair. I can tell you it's actively used. We do not have statistics on it, though. It's an additional investment to get that statistic. There are pieces of technology out there that we could measure the number of people that go past. We have not invested in that yet. Our focus really was to get the path first. But it's extremely well used. I can tell you we receive many compliments and appreciation from all of the industry in that area.
Okay, so I sort of have some trouble with the idea of building it, then figuring out how many people use it. 'Cause it goes the other way if we ask for a stop sign or every time, right? So this time, we're going to build it, then count who uses it. Seems a little backwards, but that's that.
Councillor Bondi, maybe just to clarify to your question, a stop sign or stoplight is on a road that's constructed and currently used, and this would be a new asset, so there's no one to measure the portion that is proposed to be constructed, right? Because it's not already on the road.
The phase one.
Oh, you're talking about the phase one portion?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we knew that it was very well used, then of course we would be a little more inclined, right, to, but we don't have any of that information. Mr. Bray?
Thank you, Budget Chair. Councillor Bondi, there is apps that we've reviewed from cyclists, and I can share that with you. I don't have it with me, but they map where they go, and I can say that the Round the River route, the Greenfield Global Trail, is the most actively used route by cyclists and walkers in the whole municipality. Some other larger municipalities, there's quite a network, but it's remarkable when you look at our municipality, that's really the only one that shows up in this app.
And that's what they're currently using?
That's correct.
Without a bike path?
That's correct. So part of this
well, that
is...
kind of answers my question. You know,
the prime reason is safety.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you. So this this capital item, I believe, as we heard through a deputation, has revenue attached to it. Can you explain a little bit about that, please?
So thank you, Budget Chair. So Greenfield Ethanol put forward a proposal of $50,000 per year for 5 years as a contribution to this particular project. And what Mr. Liguori explained was that if we choose not to go forward with further investment, then he would have to go back to his company and say that Chatham-Kent is not moving forward, so we would lose the $50,000 for this year.
So we're essentially leaving money on the table. I mean, it's $50,000, but it's still money that would not be able to be used elsewhere in the capital budget.
That's correct.
So as I was hearing the deputation tonight, I got a sense of quite a bit of corporate pride from one of our partners within the municipality in terms of their dedication to seeing improvements to this community that may not necessarily always be a major priority for us to spend. We've looked at our Parks and Trails maintenance budget, and that's not growing anytime soon. So we've often relied on the goodwill of citizens and corporate citizens to help develop these initiatives. I live on Tecumseh Line, much more west than where the end of this trail is, and I can tell you my children will see upwards of 50 cyclists on, I believe it's Sundays and Tuesdays from May till as late as year-round or as often as year-round, which is energizing, using this road. They're actually heading towards Lakeshore to the Lighthouse Cove or to connect with some of our neighboring cyclist trails, which every time I head into those neighboring municipalities, I am envious as a young parent with young children of the cyclist infrastructure that some of the communities around us have that we in Chatham-Kent don't have. And if we're looking to attract more young families that are looking for green time, not screen time, if I may, then we need to invest in these types of initiatives. In addition to that, I think it's very important as councillors that we trust the process that's put in front of us. So as a table around this horseshoe, we are, not engineers, and we don't get to dive into the studies and the prioritization matrices that are used when these sorts of things are presented to us. So if we start going down a path of picking things because we maybe don't like them or are feeling uncomfortable with them, the dangerous next step is then starting to lobby or advocate for things that are in our backyards instead of in the person across the tables from me backyard. So I think that opens up a dangerous path. So I will come very close to begging my fellow councillors to keeping this in the capital plan. I think it's good for health and wellness. I think it's good for attracting young families and community members. I think it's good for safety, and it's good for active transportation. So I will not be supporting the removal of this. I think this should absolutely stay in the budget.
And Gord just has one point of clarification.
Just a point of clarification on what Thomas said about Greenfield ethanol. So they've given us $50,000 for phase one. They've given us $50,000 for phase two. There's $150,000 on the line to complete the trail. It'll be paid over a 3-year period, but they're committing, if this is to finish it, it's actually $150,000.
Councillor McGregor's question, Councillor C. McGregor's question has been answered. So we have Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor McGrail, and then Mayor Caniff.
Just off the top, I remember that Greenfield had pledged some money. I was just curious as to if there was going to be any additional money coming from the province, because I do understand that they had funded phase one and phase two to I forget what the tune was, but to some sort of funding level.
Thank you, Budget Chair. We did receive some provincial funding, but not for phase three.
Okay. I think that the only thing worse than potentially putting this money in there, and I don't think it's a bad thing, I think it's a good thing, but to not finish, I think, would be an embarrassment to everybody that uses the trail. And to not only that, and I don't like pitting cyclists against drivers, because this benefits both cyclists and drivers. The app that Mr. Bray was referring to is called Strava, and if you look at it online, he is absolutely correct. It is the most heaviest used cycling route, especially in a non-urban area, out there. And adding this lane, or this path, actually goes a long way to improving not only safety for cyclists, but the usability for drivers as well. And if you look into the further into the report, under the partially funded projects, there's initiatives in regarding to widening roads, and you look at the cost of that, or adding new sidewalks along arterials and collectors, and the cost of those far exceeds adding a bike lane to one of the most picturesque and scenic and heavily used roadways for cyclists. So I'm a little too proud to beg, but I'm really close to begging council to approve this and see this project through to fruition.
Councillor McGrail.
So I just want to recap again. So when I'm looking at this picture, the purple line is what's going to be done and been approved for this year. And that is from, I can't read the roads from Kyle. Is that Kyle to Bloomfield? Okay, thank you. And I applaud that, because I have had a lot of concerned people calling me because of the offshore workers riding their bikes at night without any kind of protective gear. So that part of it is definitely a safety issue that it was just a matter of time. So I applaud that piece is being completed for sure. So.
Do you have a comment, Thomas?
Yes, I probably should have started. Thank you, Budget Chair. Is that this has been in process for quite some time. We actually started with an ad hoc committee that consisted of Greenfield Ethanol, Union Gas, St. Clair College. Mayor Caniff was on that committee. And we, after some of the failures that we've had on bike lane implementation, this group got together and said, what do we do differently than we have in the past? Because all other communities are moving forward with these beautiful trails. And the one thing that everybody said was that we have a completely disjointed bike trail system within Chatham. It's only 33% implementation. So they said, what we need to do is to invest in a place where you can take people out, it's safe, it's a beautiful drive, and you can actually go somewhere and enjoy it. So everyone on the committee chose this particular path as the #1 priority within Chatham-Kent. Following that, we had 3 different PICs, Public Information Centers, and I can tell you we had a lot of objection from people. It was at 70% in favor. On the third particular PIC, it was in excess of 90% were in favor of this particular bike trail, and those were people living on that particular area. So there's a long history here. Many of the people you saw here today were part of that original committee, and Councillor Harrigan nailed it, that it's a safety issue. It's a beautiful area to go. It's active transportation. And this is one of our real weaknesses within Chatham-Kent as well. This would be the premier spot now to go. So Union Gas mentioned and St. Clair College that they have an awful time trying to attract young people on how nice it would be to have something like this in that area that they could show their employees and say, hey, you can go use that now. Thank you.
Mayor Caniff?
Thank you, Budget Chair. I will try not to repeat what's been said. I will agree with my cohorts to the right here, Councillor Harrigan, Councillor Thompson. I don't want to beg either, but I strongly encourage this, and I'll go through. I'll try and add to what's been said. One of the things that hasn't been said yet is the improvement on life cycle. So what happens with these trails is we're expanding the road itself. So instead of the road being, let's say, 20 feet wide, it'll be 30 feet wide. I'm just using rough numbers. It'll preserve the road that's in place and allow the road itself to be used longer. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct, and I'll add one more if I could, if you haven't thought of it already. So right now, we spend money on gravel shoulder maintenance. All of that would be gone as well. So that's not included in the savings. Okay, so life cycle, and I want to really emphasize the industry. When you look there, there's a lot of industry all along there, and it starts connecting things. If you've got a car, you don't really think about it, but if you use that and you're saying, I need that for transportation and safety, it's a really key thing. As well, we're looking at expanding Bloomfield. You see there's a housing development, 400 houses going there. This serves to start connecting that to other bike trails in the area. As we proceed on, that will be certainly an area that a lot of people will be connecting to. And the last thing I just want to add is, if you look at any modern community, what do they have? They have bike trails and lots of them. When I look around Chatham-Kent, we're lacking in that. And so that's one of those things young families are looking for. If we want to be in the 21st century in Chatham-Kent, we have to start going there for a whole lot of reasons that have already been mentioned. I won't go into those details, but this is an important investment in Chatham-Kent. Thanks.
Councillor Sakachi?
Through the chair, literally all the stuff that I spoke to Chris Teber about and asking him some questions was just mentioned by Mayor Caniff. I just wanted to ask one quick question to Thomas. So Mr. Kelly, from an engineering perspective, not a common sense perspective, how much sense would it be to have phase 1 and 2 implemented and then abort phase 3?
So phase 1 is done, right? Phase 2 is planned for this year. And we would go back to the same issues we had. That we want the full connection. People want to go and have a nice trip and enjoy that trip. And the other interesting thing is that it's exactly half a marathon. So we talked about even another option, economic development, that you could run marathons out there now, or half marathon, or races, and do so in a safe manner. I want to mention that we did have a fatality out there on a bicycle that was at night a few years ago. So there is a huge safety component of all of this. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess my question was more so, it doesn't make sense that we're going to go with phase 1 already, which was done, then phase 2, and then not do phase 3. That wouldn't make much sense. I'll be supporting this as well, and I echo my councillor to my left's comments here. Thank you.
Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What exactly is the motion? I was out of the room when the motion was was made. So I know is it just removing the trail portion from the capital budget? Is that the motion?
Yeah. So the motion would remove it from the capital budget. So a vote yes on the motion removes us from the capital budget. A vote no would keep it in the capital budget.
Okay. Well, I want to. I had a conversation with Gord yesterday, so maybe I can have him because I was asking about some of the items in the capital budget and whether they could be removed in order to save some funds for the tax increase. But I'll throw it over to Gord because we have some additional funding in the capital budget this year that is contingent on it remaining at a certain level, right? Can you explain that a little bit more, Gord?
Yep. So sure, we've the motion to put on the floor is just talking about pulling one item. It has nothing to do with the tax rate. Our recommendation is $6.3 million for the capital budget. These are the top-ranked items on Appendix A. Pulling this item off just means we fund more items, fund more of some of the not totally paid-for items on Appendix A, or move to Appendix B and start funding items on there. It's a different debate on debating about the $6.3 million that's in the capital budget, plus the $6.7 million that we're getting one time as federal gas tax funds. And also as just more of our conversation, this one-time federal gas tax funding of the $6.7 million that we received, it's not to replace us. We can't substitute our $6.3 million with the federal gas tax funds. It has to be for incremental funding. So it's not as if we can cut our base budget in the capital budget and just use the federal gas tax this year. That has to be used for incremental funding. So that's why we're recommending a $13 million capital budget this year.
Right. So remove that your chance of the extra federal
on cutting the capital budget. This vote's just about a project. I would say if you remove this 1.4 million, we're then going to Appendix B, Item 7, widening Park Ave West from Kyle to Bloomfield. That's the next project on the list. So we would just put that 1.4 million towards the 3 million that's needed, or sorry, towards the 4 million that's needed for that project.
Right. So the next one would just get bumped up, essentially. That's okay.
Right. It's a different motion to cut the capital budget funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Solomon, followed by Councillor Foss.
Okay. I had a couple questions. One is the Bloomfield separated multi-use pathway. It goes up to Richmond right now, and it's asphalt, and it's and it's the best one we have in town because it's away from the road. There's a separation, which is what I prefer any bike path to be, rather than sandwiching it into Victoria Avenue or LaCroix Street or places that we've done in the past that didn't work out worth a darn. But that should go. Is that planned to go further to cross the railway tracks at past Bloomfield? Because I noticed the next project is Park Avenue that somebody just raised, and it has gravel shoulders that you could save money on not having anymore. So is that part of your overall plan later?
Through the budget, Chair, yes. We plan to extend that down. As the mayor noted, there is that new subdivision down there.
Right. That's what I'm
also,
asking.
It's important to note that we have a separated pathway going where the Greenfield Global Trail starts right at the corner of Hoovelmans. It now goes up to McNaughton. So this all ties in with other areas going over to McNaughton and into Paxton's Bush.
Yeah, that's not my question, though, but that's helpful.
Yes.
And I do like the one that's on the beside the car dealerships, but that's not my question. The question is, if it's planning to go down to Park Avenue where that new subdivision is, and that's what I was really heading at, what's the story on the railway track, the CN rail that the sidewalks haven't even been able to get across? Why are they holding that up? And if they're holding that up, how do you get a path across? And it's been about, I think over a year. There's the beautiful sidewalks are there, and then there's a gap. And they don't go across the railway tracks. It's mud. So you can't really use it. They're useless. Who's going to answer that one? Okay.
That portion across the tracks, we're really just waiting on CN. We have to have somebody there to do the work.
But have they agreed to it?
Yes. So it's part of the Bloomfield Road upgrades project.
Yeah.
So it's still scheduled to be done this year. So the section, the sidewalk has been completed up to the tracks on both sides.
Okay.
And it'll just be connected across the tracks.
Well, they haven't been too quick on it because I've been asking about this for over a year. So.
Yeah. It's been a couple years now.
Okay. Well, that's good because that gives me
it is scheduled to be part of the Bloomfield project.
That gives me more confidence on getting up to that other subdivision with some other things. My next question is, can you put the one up before this? Your sketch before this? Well, I don't know. Yeah. So phase 1 is the green area, correct? Can I ask through you directly to save time? Green area, phase 1?
Correct.
And then you've shown us the other phase 2 that's already been approved on the other side, which we just saw. But phase 3 looks like it's, unless I'm mistaken, about 6 times as big as phase 1. And we're doing it all at once. Correct? That's your plan?
That's correct, yeah. And we might even combine that with phase 2, depending on
Well,
what
I was
happens
thinking of
tonight.
slowing it down rather than speeding it up. I mean, why are we doing it like we did the others in sort of gradual phases, and now the next one is 6 times as long, and we're going to do it all at once? Why?
The reason is that there is, A, we want to get it done, and B, that there's economies of scale, certainly. It's much more attractive to a contractor to do a much larger section than a very small section. So we feel we'll get more interested contractors, we'll get a better price from the market.
Well, yeah, but that would have driven you to make phase 1 bigger too then. I'm trying to figure out, we've got so many capital projects that need to be done. Frankly, the priority of the public that I hear from is the roads, the potholes in the roads, sidewalks that are broken, not new sidewalks. And yet, here we go. We could do this in 2 phases, 2 other split phase 3 up into a couple, and we'd have more money for other things. That's what I'm really asking. It's only one pot. I'm just wondering why. Why can't we do it? The ethanol money is coming over the next 3 years. Why can't this be 3 years?
Well, it could. You probably won't get the same level of competitiveness from the contract base. Number 2 is that this is all essentially a paved shoulder. So we tried to take advantage of the off-road where we can. Mm-hmm. Through this committee that occurred 6 years ago, we made the decision that to do off-road all throughout that trail would be very costly because we'd have to purchase property. Yep. And that would have taken an extremely long time. So our goal is just to move forward with this and complete the project so that everybody can enjoy it much sooner than years from now.
Okay, my final question is something that Gord came up with, and that was that if you pass this motion, then you just move something up, the next project up. I don't agree with that because this is a 3-pronged motion, and it's asking for an addition of 517. If you reduce this by something, you could. I'm not talking about cutting it all out, but if you reduced it, you'd be able to pay for the 517 that you're asking for an addition.
So the motion on the floor is to remove this item from the capital budget. It doesn't say anything about the funding. So depending on how this motion goes, or regardless of how this motion goes, someone could make a motion later that says we want to decrease the capital budget by X amount of dollars, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood they could say, no, the money could be applied in a different way.
Right.
Okay.
Councillor Foss?
Thank you, Budget Chair. I'm very much in support of the project. I'm on the Board of Health, and that's part of our mandate is to make a healthy community and an active community, and this is one of the ways to do that. And I think that's important. I guess we approved at the Board of Health health in all the departments type thing. So, in my opinion, this is one of the initiatives that we're dealing with in recreation that is part of planning a healthy community type thing. So, and I know that's all been said, and a lot of comments have been made tonight about it. The one question I do have, how much have we spent on the trail thus far?
Thank you, Budget Chair. The phase 1 was roughly 800,000.
How much, sorry?
800.
800, and phase 2 we've already committed to?
I believe it was about 450,000.
450.
Yeah.
So, and then today we're approving 1.4 million to finish it, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So we're a long ways along on phase 1 and 2, and if we can finish it, it would be a shame not to continue with it, looking at the amount of money that we've already spent and the commitments that we've got from the industries. So I'm very much in favor of this project.
And just to clarify, we already paid for the engineering of the whole project, correct? Yep. Councillor Finn?
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. Since Mr. Kelly brought it up, the fatality that happened just a few years ago. I knew the young gentleman very well, his mother very well, and when they completed the Bloomfield section, the woman broke down in tears, couldn't find me fast enough to say thank you. So I am in favor of this fully.
Any other questions on this item? So after we vote on this, we're going to break and go to closed session. But prior to that, if you have any questions of clarity for any other items in the binder, that would be the appropriate time to ask those, so we give staff time to bring those answers back to us for tomorrow. So just before we vote, I agree with a number of the comments made. This is a need in the community. It's gone through a ton of community input. There's an appetite for it to be completed. It's the most economical way to increase cycling in the community. And Councillor Solomon makes a good point that the safest place for motorists and bicycles is away from each other, and this is the best way to achieve that. So I'll call the vote. Just a reminder, if you want to remove this from the budget, it's a yes vote. If you'd like to keep it in the capital budget, it's a no vote.
All votes are in. Motion fails 4 to 14.
Okay, so any questions of clarity, requests for information for tomorrow night? Councillor Harrigan?
Sorry, just a question about the current agenda item. Are we going to continue talking about capital tomorrow then? Yes. Okay.
Councillor Hall?
Just a question. I know there was a deputation tonight that I was hoping to get staff to address. Is now an appropriate time for a deputation that was tonight, or when should that be brought up?
I know staff is working on that request. I know there's been a meeting with the concerned residents.
Right.
So,
I was aware of some of the information that I'm just wondering when would be a good time to publicly.
Okay, we can maybe get a quick summary right now if we
I know the speaker's still here.
Understood, yeah.
Sorry, if I can confirm, is that the Wallaceburg pool piece?
Correct.
Okay. So thank you. I did have an opportunity to speak to our lady making the deputation both in Wallaceburg on budget night. We reconnected again tonight. April's team is reviewing all of the requests. In fact, there was a much larger study underway with the staff. I think the primary request was, can we build in an annual rate for the aquafit? And I believe that's something that the team is looking at. We'll be coming back to council with a recommendation. And I think the other part of that Donna had raised was making sure that there's the same type of discounted rate for a one-year pass as the other membership categories enjoy. So that's something that staff are looking at, but there is a much broader range of programming and cost implications and scheduling that April, Evelyn, and the rest of the team are actually looking at right now, and that will be brought back to council a little later date. But the commitment is that we are looking at it. We appreciated, we heard the recommendation, and the annual rate is something that we made a commitment to look at. I think that will be coming forward, but it'll be up for council's approval for consideration.
Thanks, Don.
Any other questions or requests for information? Councillor Pinsonneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just item 33, it's Highgate Fire for the cistern. And I thought, and I'm going back a few years in capital budget, did we not already put money away to fix that? And I guess that's something to look up. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, we can get that answered tomorrow night.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Any other requests for information? Okay. So I'm going to read out the motion that we need to adjourn to closed, and then I'll need a mover and a seconder. So the council move into closed session meeting of council pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended for the following reasons: identifiable individuals, labor relations, employee negotiations, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege in regard to 2020 labor contracts, net job evaluation changes, net progression increases per labor contracts. The open portion of this budget committee meeting will recess at 8:30. The next open portion of the meeting for the Budget Committee is January 29th, 2020 at 6 o'clock. Also, as per the public notice bylaw, Chatham-Kent Council hereby gives public notice of its intention to hold public meetings and adopt the 2020 budget immediately following receipt of a recommended budget from the Budget Committee. Moved by Councillor Oche, seconded by Councillor Latimer. All those in favor? Any opposed? We will restart closed session in here at 8:40.